Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let's have your church, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. Go ahead and have your notes open. We are going to continue looking at the United States Constitution. Yes, we got a Constitution. I'm wearing my Constitution tie because I like the Constitution. The Constitution is a very important document for our country. It's got all kinds of very important things. As we go through this unit, we're going to see that the Constitution is worth defending and worth supporting. Because I like our government, and I want to have peaceful things associated with our government. Yes. All right, so, shall we? Oh, by the way, we've already done the test. I got a couple more people that are taking the test. There's opportunities for so-called retake, picking up additional points. Check Google Classroom. There's opportunities for, particularly if you're like just below the grade where you're at and you want to be a little bit higher, get the things done. It's very important if you have a responsibility to get it done and turned in to me by next week on Wednesday, the 20th. Okay? Yeah, because the end of next week is actually, that's the end of the semester. And by the way, next week, Thursday, you guys won't be here in the afternoon. The exams, it's first, second, third, fourth period. It's a short day. And so you won't be going to fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth period classes, including my class, on that day. So I'll see you today. I'll see you Thursday of this week. Then I'll see you Tuesday of next week. You will see me Thursday of this week, but next week, Thursday and Friday are shorter days. For you guys, since it's a blue day, Thursday is the short day. Well, you're not here on Friday. No, for mine, we don't do the Zoom. I'll give you stuff that you can work on. But we're continuing on with the Constitution. Okay? For next week, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I was listening in one of the classes. They're like, well, Monday we're going to make you do all kinds of stuff and so forth. And Jan was like, but it's a holiday. What holiday is it? Absolutely, Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And so, yeah, we're going to be learning more about Martin Luther King Jr., second semester, and the whole civil rights movement and so forth. Very, very important part of our country's history and civil rights. But yeah, that is a federal holiday. And what day next week will there be an inauguration? Let me see, what are the guys' names? One of them is a man, Joe Biden for president, and Kamala Harris for vice president. What day of the week is that taking place? 20th, exactly, which is going to be a Wednesday. So you guys will be at home. I think noon was the time. So 10 o'clock our time is when the swearing in is going to be done. And no surprise, they're actually going to be shutting down a lot of the various different things around there and making sure there's plenty of security in case somebody has some silly idea of trying to mess it all up. I think that's going to actually take place this week. It sounds like the Democratic leadership in the House is moving very quickly, and I read that the vote on impeachment, one article of impeachment associated with what took place on the 6th, right, with the rally and then the aftermath and raiding the Capitol and so forth. It sounds like they're going to have a vote on that tomorrow. So they're going to move very quickly on that. But remember, is that all there is? What happens after an impeachment? Where does the impeachment take place? In the House or the Senate? House is right. And in the House, I would pretty much say that it's going to be impeachment. Because the people who put forth the impeachment articles, the request for there to be impeachment, they got other people to sign on. Let's see if you can figure out this number. Jenna, what is required for an impeachment to pass the House? Simple majority. Out of 435, how many is a simple majority, the lowest number? 18, right. There are 218 people that have signed on for the impeachment of Donald Trump. That's a pretty clear indication that if they all show up in the House that day, there will be 218 votes at least. Then it goes to the Senate. Well, the Senate's not even going to be operating until Tuesday of next week. And the next day is when the inauguration takes place. So it sounds like the Senate might not deal with it, maybe not for even a few months. And we're like, well, he's already out of office. What more could you do? The question is, if the Senate convicts, on what percentage of vote? 2/3, yeah. That then might be a consequence of like that Trump was ineligible to run for office after that. Yeah, I was like, because I hardly even thought about that part in there, but they've been discussing that in the news, in which case if he wanted to run again for President of the United States, if the Senate did convict, then he wouldn't be eligible to do that. But who knows, okay? But I think it's pretty fair to say, you can write this down, 2021 prediction, pretty likely prediction, that Donald Trump would be impeached and be the first president to be impeached twice, okay? With less than a week to spare in his term of office. Yeah.
I have two questions.
Yep.
So, how many times do you do
I don't know. How many times is he going to be impeached? Yeah, when I was a deputy prosecutor, I would look and see some of the people who were criminal defendants that were coming through the courts. They'd been charged over and over and over and over, and some of the times they've been convicted and so forth. Right? So you're charged with a wrongdoing. This would be the last time because you can't really do anything more before. But we already know this, right? Trey, how many presidents in the United States have been impeached? Exactly, 3. Do you know the names of those presidents? And you can look on the board if you need to.
Andrew Johnson,
Correct.
Bill Clinton, and
Correct.
Richard Nixon.
Wrong.
Wait, who got it?
Richard Nixon was about to get impeached. Who was the 3rd president to get impeached? Yeah, the one we're talking about, Donald Trump. Yeah, and his first impeachment was last year at the very beginning of 2020. They actually started the process the previous year and carried it over. Yes, quick question.
Okay, the next one is, I was watching the news this morning, and what's the whole thing about, Brett on all 50 passengers?
I don't know. Obviously, security concerns are very heightened because of what happened last week. And they're picking up various different ideas that there would be protests at all the different capitals associated with, the transition from Trump to Biden. And under normal circumstances, when Donald Trump became president of the United States, there was all kinds of protests in different parts of the country, either on Inauguration Day or later. And is it cool to protest in this country if it's peaceful? Yes, it's a constitutionally protected right under the First Amendment. It's not cool when the goal of the gathering is not free, peaceful protests. So that's where I think the security, like the FBI and other security involved agencies around this country, are concerned about that because it looks like there will be rallies and gatherings on the 20th and maybe even some days before and after. So that's what the concern is. Because we thought on Wednesday of last week that it was going to be just a peaceful protest. Turned out that there was a lot more than just peaceful protest when people are banging in the Capitol and so forth, and breaking into that. Okay, so that's all messed up. So you ready to continue talking about the Constitution and what's in it? What section? I'll tell you. All right, so if you look, we're at section number 3. We're about to go into, or actually, we're just about to wrap up with section number 3. Okay? We have the Vice President. Okay, you got this in your notes? The one right now and for the next week is Mike Pence. What will make him no longer the Vice President? His term runs out. When does his term run out? The 20th, yeah, exactly. Who will be the new Vice President? And she'll be on your test. Kamala Harris, okay? She'll be the new Vice President, or also known as President of the Senate. And Vera, does the President of the Senate have a lot of power? No. When they run the Senate, they shut people down from talking? Not so much. Yeah, because that's the rules of the Senate. What can they do? Tell me what their powers are as being Vice President. Well, yeah, we got the 25th Amendment. If the President is declared by the Vice President and a majority of the Cabinet, and we'll actually get that officially later in your notes, that's the 25th Amendment, then it can become acting president. Or if the president dies, or resigns, then they become president. What about when there's voting in the Senate? Can they ever vote? When? Starts with a T, rhymes with I. Tie, even, yeah, exactly. So if there's a 50-50 tie or whatever, then they get to break the tie vote. Other than that, there's not a lot of real power officially for the vice president. To the extent that, like in the last, I'm going to say like even 20, 30 years, vice presidents have been very important. It's because of what the president gives them to do. Make a note of that. Presidents have been giving them a lot of important things to do that's not required under the Constitution, but they're like, hey, you're part of the team. Let's keep this thing going. All right? Now, write this down. These will be, and this is going to be on your test, okay? And this actually officially takes place when they finally get the new vice president in. So just anticipate this is going to be after Kamala Harris breaks the tie as to who is in the majority and who's in the minority. You got, seriously, write this down, 50 Republicans and 50 Democrats. You're like, that's not a majority. That's not a majority. Well then, but you have a tie vote. And if the Democrat, Kamala Harris, breaks it in favor of the Democrats, who is the majority leader? Chuck Schumer, yep. He is one of the 2 senators from the state of New York. He is the leader of the Democrats in the Senate. Who picks their leader? The Democrats in the Senate, yeah. So Chuck Schumer, right down here. Okay, with the kind of low-hanging glasses and so forth. Right here, peace, is Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky. He has been the majority leader. I want to say, like, at the moment I'm speaking, I believe he's still the majority leader. But give it another week or so, when you have the tie vote broken, Mitch McConnell will be the minority leader. He will be the leader of the Republicans, who are in a very slight minority, only because of Kamala Harris breaking the tie vote in favor of the Democrats. You got that? That's who their leaders are. They're very important because they help to set strategy for their respective parties. Here are the 2. Everyone get that written down in their notes? Okay. Here are the 2 that are Idaho's senators. Okay. Here are the 2 that are Idaho senators. The one that's been in the longest is Mike Crapo. Yeah. Just focus on this. This is what you're supposed to be doing in here. Mike Crapo is Idaho's senior senator. Idaho's senior senator as opposed to Idaho's junior senator? Does one have more power, more votes than the other? No, they both each have 1 vote in the Senate. But they've been there for some time. Actually, Jim Risch has been there for quite a bit of time, too. Right now, he's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which is a very important committee. Will he continue being the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee as a Republican when the Democrats are in the majority? Nope. He'll be like the ranking member of that committee. Both of them from Idaho, both, as it turns out, see if you can guess this. Shouldn't be too hard. I'll take a hand. What is their profession? I don't think I told you that Mike Simpson, we get Mike Simpson, he's a dentist. And Russ Fulcher, I want to say he's an attorney. But Mike Simpson is a dentist professionally, although I don't think he's done a lot of dental work lately. What about these 2 men from Idaho who are in the United States Senate? No, neither of them are dentists. I don't think there's too many dentists. What do you think? Do you know? Do you remember? What do you think? Truck drivers? No? What did you say? Attorney is right. Write it down. They're lawyers. They're attorneys. I mean, hello? Does being an attorney show that you have an interest in things having to do with government? Yeah. Does the background in law and so forth help you to come up with laws and so forth as part of the government? Sure. These guys are both attorneys. Mike Crapo from Idaho Falls and Jim Risch from Boise. Jim Risch. And Mike Crapo. Crapo. Think of a Y being after the A, and that will help you from mispronouncing it. Crapo. That is just so easy. All right. Now, that takes us through Section 3 of Article 1. Let's go into Section 4. You ready? Section 4 of Article 1, do you see that? Sessions and elections. I've got a couple of things I'm going to say about Article 4. All right? Sessions and elections. Every 2 years, we know this, write this down. Every 2 years, there's a federal election. So I can check with you. And Megan, how many of the 435 members of the House are up for election every 2 years? I'll back it up. What is the length of the term for House of Representatives? How many years? 2. So how many of the 435 are up for election every 2 years? You say what? The House, yeah, House. If all of them have 2-year terms and 2 years has expired, how many of them are up for re-election? All of them, yeah, exactly. Write that down. So all members of the House of Representatives, I mean, it helps to remember that. They're all up for election. And it's very close right now between the Republicans and Democrats. So we'll watch very carefully over the next 2 years to see if that changes. When Trump started out, the Republicans were in the majority. And then after 2 years, the Democrats took the majority. And the Democrats have the majority right now, although it's a lot closer. The Republicans are like, oh, maybe after 2 years of Biden and so forth, maybe they'll take over, but we'll see. So every 2 years there's an election. How many of the 100 senators are up for election in the next election? How long is the term for the Senate? 6 years. And are they all up at the same time, or do they... Yeah, how many are in each of the different groups? I'll give you a clue. There are 3 groups. Yeah, so 1/3. How many is there, like a third of 100? 33. Yeah, so 33 or 34 will be up for election in the next election. The next federal election is what year? 2022. They're every even-numbered year. When's the next presidential election? 2024. Okay? 2024. So the next election for all of the House, 2022. And a third of the Senate, 2022. Got that? All right? Now, here's what you need to also write down. Here. There is a formula for when that election takes place. Ready to figure out the formula? I bet you can get most of this. The month. What do you think is the month, Scott, for the federal election? No, we're in January. We did not have an election. Think of what month the election was held when Trump and Biden were both running against each other for presidency. And by the way, all those other federal elections were going on for the Senate and the House. How long ago was that? A little bit before December. What is the month before December? No. Yeah, exactly. Write this down. November. The federal election is every 2 years in the month of November. All right, now we're looking for a day of the week. Help us out. What's the day of the week that the election is held? Was it a Monday? No, it wasn't a Wednesday. Tuesday. Write it down. Tuesday. It's always going to be on a Tuesday. Write that down. A Tuesday. You guys remember if it was like early in the month or late in the month? It was early. It was very early in the month. Write this down. Here's the formula. So we got the 2 years, every 2 years, month of November, Tuesday. First Tuesday after the first Monday. I know. So can it ever be on November the 1st? No. Because if Tuesday is November the 1st, what was Monday? Thank you, October 31st. Yeah, Halloween. Okay? So, the only days that it's possible for the elections to actually be held is November 2nd through like November 8th. Okay? So we'll get it in November. And does that give us enough time after November to like recount or do all the court cases and all that kind of stuff and hold rallies? And yeah, I mean we had the election back in November and we still do not have the inauguration, but we'll have it next week on Wednesday. All right, at least for the presidency. The members of the House and Senate, write this down, they've already gotten sworn in. They're already sworn in. The newly elected members of the House are in there already. Same thing with the Senate. They're in there already. I will tell you. They start their session, you ready? Write this down. January 3rd. Although I think if January 3rd, like this year, January 3rd was a Sunday, I think they'll like start it on the Monday following. Okay? Yeah. And then so what do they do in some of the early stages of that? They organize, they put people on committees. On January 6th, they were doing what is sometimes a very mundane thing. It's like, open up the electoral votes. Oh, wow, surprise. Yeah, there we go. Normally, it's a pretty mundane thing when you open up the electoral votes every 4 years. But this year, it was something different. January 6th, they opened up their electoral votes, and they were in the midst of a big political protest that ended up being an invasion of the Capitol building itself, because the people who were going into the Capitol building were like, we don't like the results of that electoral vote. So, did they ultimately count the electoral votes that night after they cleared everybody out there? Yes, actually, and I think they gave the official verdict at like 3 a.m. the following morning. So, I mean, it was clearly it was delayed, but it was not stopped. Put this down. Even though you're elected for like a 2-year or 4-year or whatever 6-year term, it's a 1-year session. Make sure you write this down. So for every 2-year chunk, there's like 2 sessions, and they each last 1 year. Make sure you have that down. And I'll give you why that's important. Are you ready? So, if you were elected and you had an idea of like a really good idea for a law, anybody know what do you call that? This will be officially in your notes. In fact, I think it's already in the bullet points down there. What do you call a proposal for a law? It's not a law yet, but it's your proposal. You've written it down on paper. You submit it. You submit it, and there it is. It's all proposed. I'm not a law yet. I'm just a bill, exactly. That's a proposed law. You can put this down. This is one of the impact of it being a 1-year session. Let's say you propose your bill in January. It goes through all kinds of rigmarole and so forth. How long does it have before time runs out? And if it's not been voted on and becomes a law, signed by the president and so forth, it's dead. Anybody know? 1 year. You got to get it done before that year is out. There you go. Although, what if you were like just about to get that thing through in December and time runs out? Oh my gosh. Come in the next year, January, reintroduce it, and like hopefully it'll get moving along a little bit quicker. Does that make sense? Right? So they're like right now there's people saying, oh, there should be like a $2,000 check and so forth issued by the government to people having to do with the effects of COVID. Did they get that through in December? No, I think like a $600 one. There's people like, well, we should do that, a $2,000 one this year. Can they do it this year? Because they didn't get it done last year. Can they do it this year? If they want to, yeah. You just introduce a new bill and so forth. Okay? Without being too complicated. There's nothing really too exciting about that. A term lasts 2 years. Each session within the term of two sessions lasts a year long. So usually you go January all the way till near December. Although usually what's happening in late December, that Congress is like, can we just get out of here? What's usually happening around like at the end of December, that they're like, can we just like take a vacation? Yeah. At the end of December? Christmas, yeah, Christmas and New Year's and all the holidays and everything like that. So they're like, usually they take some time away from that. Although this year I think there was still a lot of action going on just because of everything that was happening. Okay? So, got that? All right. And this is what you do when you take your oath of office. I do solemnly swear or affirm, because sometimes people don't want to swear, but they can affirm, that I will support, and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign, outsiders, and domestic, like in this country, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of my office on which I am about to enter. Now they can, if they want to, do this so help me God. Is it required to have a religious component to the oath? No, it's not required. Most of them, a lot of them do have that as well. Okay? Because they're making it before the people, but they're also making it according to their religious conscience before their God. Okay? So that's the oath that they take in January. Okay? Questions about that? Good. Next one. Oh, let's get into organizational details. Actually, we'll back it up. I'm going to leave it right there because I don't really have a slide to do this part here. Organizational details. Section 5, organizational details. You ready? Here we go. Write this down. We got 2 different bullet points. The second bullet point is going to be a little bit more lengthy as far as telling you the story to give you a sense of how this works out. Okay? The first thing says, judges of elections. And I'll have you write this down. The House judges who was elected to the House. The Senate judges who was elected to the Senate. And usually it's not very controversial. For example, for a House race, you could say, oh, we've just received word from that district that this candidate has a lot more votes than anybody else. So we judge that you won. Ooh, stop the presses. Oh my gosh, wow, that is amazing. That's like nothing. I mean, is that even controversial? All right, now here. Is it possible for an election to be so close you're not really even sure who won? Actually, this happens. Out of 435, inevitably, there's going to be some close. And I think there's one up in New York right now that's like really crazy close. I mean, sometimes the difference is like, I don't know, in Trump's races, what was the difference between him and Biden, say, in a close race in Georgia? Anybody know? Are we talking like tens, hundreds, thousands? I want to say ended up being like something like 18,000 or something like that. Anyway, it was a pretty fair, it was in the thousands. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll do a recount if it's very close. I think they already did a recount in Wisconsin. Trump was behind by Biden by a little bit. And then when they did the recount, Biden still won. My Uncle Reed right here, Elect Reed Hansen for state representative, he lost one election by 5 votes. And they did a recount. And it changed slightly, like some of the cards had gotten kind of stuck together and so forth. And like in one precinct, it changed by 1 vote, and then another precinct, it changed by 1 vote. And the end of result was he still lost by 5 votes after the recount. But what happens here? You ready? You tell me. I need some volunteers. I need a volunteer. I need a volunteer in a, let's say that there's a House race, and it's in Idaho. I need a Democrat. Okay, we got a Democrat right here. We got a Democrat you're running for, and then you're going to be the Republican. Okay, so you're the Republican. Okay, so here we go. We have the election. It's so close. It is so close. After the ballots are counted, you win by 3 votes. But 3 votes is really close in an election that have tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of voters, and so they do a recount. You win by 4 votes in the recount. And you're like, what? And so the people in the state of Idaho are like, oh my gosh, we're not really quite sure who won.
I won.
Who won? He won by 3 votes in the first go around. Oh wait, no, they do it again. Recount, you win by 1 vote.
Nah,
So who wins?
me.
How many of you say the Democrat wins right here, having won in 2 of the counts, and the latest count, or this person who got 4, the Republican? I know, this is one, and actually it's really interesting because right now, they're really super sensitive about this right now, because in the past, it was really easy. Both of them would come in and go, hey, House of Representatives, you should judge me to be the winner. And who would the House of Representatives judge to be the winner? Well, here, this is where it gets a little cynical. You ready? Write this down. Typically in the past, when this comes up, like maybe every 10 years, maybe 20 years sometimes, whoever's in the majority will say, yeah, our guy won. So who's in the majority right now, Trey?
Right now,
Yeah, right now. And actually, yeah, right now and even last month and next month too. Democrats are. So who would be a judge of the winner? Yeah, you would, the Democratic candidate in that close race. Although that one in New York, I think there actually is one where in the latest recount, I think the Republican won by literally, it was just a handful of votes. And the Democrat was like, I've heard Mr. Hansen's lecture before on this one. I don't need to worry about it. The Democrats are going to let me in. Well, who has been saying lately, you have to count the votes and don't do any shenanigans? Democrats, yeah. And so I think at this point, the Democrats are going to have the Republican in that particular New York race who won very close. But sometimes it's so close you really can't be absolutely, totally certain who did win. And here's one for you. You guys ready? How do you determine, Frank, how would you determine in a race, let's say it's a small race for like city, and they did the recount and everything and so forth, and it was a perfect tie each time. Who wins? What would be a good way to... Exactly. No, I mean, seriously, they'll come up with things like rock, paper, scissors, or they'll do like a poker hand, or they'll do like a game of horse or something. I don't know. They'll do some kind of thing that's just sort of like, hey, somebody's got to win. Yeah.
wouldn't like the Senate vote? Like the Senate of the
There was a race, actually this year for Ada County Highway District. There was one, my brother was re-elected pretty handily, but there was one of the races where the difference was, I think I want to say initially like 3 or 4 votes, and they did a recount and it got a little bit bigger, the margin of victory, but not a lot. But, you know, that's what it is. Okay? So, who is going to be the judge of the elections in the House? It's the House, and typically it'll be whoever's in the majority that's going to say, yeah, our guy won. But this year's a little different. I think there's a little bit more sensitivity to that. Yeah? No, they had both names on the ballot, yeah. But I mean, not everyone necessarily votes in some of those other races. I mean, they vote for the presidential race and then they're like, I haven't done my homework, I don't know what's going on here. So, but you win by having more votes than the next person. All right, here we go. Oh, next. Punishing behavior and expulsions. Write this down. You ready? This is important, and this is actually in the news right now. Okay? Who is in charge of punishing misbehavior by members of the House? Answer, write this down. The House. Who is in charge of punishing misbehavior by members of the Senate? The Senate. Okay, so they're each in charge of their own chambers of managing behavior. The most they can do, write this down, is expulsion. The House could vote to expel a member of the House. Similarly, the Senate could vote to expel a member of the Senate. You writing that down? Okay, and there actually has been some talk about that. Because in this whole thing having to do with the election of Biden and Trump and so forth, there were some members in the House and Senate who were objecting to the Electoral College vote and so forth. And some people are like, well, that's really terrible that they did that. And that was part of the whole instigation. And then you saw what happened in the Capitol building when people came charging in and so forth. And other people are like, well, don't blame them. You know, it's not like they were trying to get the crowd riled up. And they're like, well, wait a minute. Actually, you know, what they were doing was... You know, they were making positions that were farcical and weren't really based on reality. So anyway, I'm just saying this. Right now, there is discussion about whether or not some people should be expelled. That would be the most. Here's the next thing. Write this down. You ready? Short of expelling somebody, the House could vote, relative to the House, the Senate could vote, relative to the Senate, to punish them in other ways. And we're not talking about physical punishment in front of everybody in the Senate. Yeah, no, that's what you want. Aw, you want to like take out your hand. We're going to wrap you on the wrist. I mean, here's one thing they could do. Write this down. you could kick them off committees. All right, because in the House and the Senate, it's very important to get things done. People are on very important committees. So you could say, hey, we're going to punish you. We're going to remove you from these committees that you're on. Here's another thing they could do. And sometimes people are like, this is really important. Other people are like, that's just a scolding. It's called censure. C-E-N-S-U-R-E. Censure. It's basically saying, shame on you. That was bad. We're going to make it clear. How many of you guys have ever been like verbally admonished, verbally censured? Somebody said you did something really bad. And how many of you guys at times in your life, depending on who it was, the circumstances, and so forth, I mean, that was enough. I mean, that hit you. Okay? Thank you. How many of you guys at other points in time in your life, maybe you've been told something, you were verbally admonished and told shame on you, but it really, you're like thinking, I'm not going to say anything because if I let it out, that I feel like I got off easy, that they're going to come down harder on me. How many of you guys have ever been like put in that sort of like verbal timeout sort of thing, and you're like, woo, right? Somebody might look at that and go, oh, well, they're just getting a little slap on the wrist, not much punishment. So when do you do that? All right, I'm going to give you two examples historically, both of them in the United States Senate. You ready? And does this rise to the level of these people being punished? The first one has to do with a Republican senator from the state of Louisiana. I want to say this has been a while now, at least 10 years, maybe more, probably more. Anyway, his name was David Vitter. He was a United States senator from Louisiana. Okay, so he was elected by the people from Louisiana. And while he's serving in the United States Senate from Louisiana, he's prosecuted for a felony. Do you understand felony is like more serious than misdemeanor? You got that? Okay, felony. For a felony crime in Louisiana, and he was convicted of soliciting prostitution or engaging in prostitution. Do you understand what that is? Paying somebody for sexual acts. So he was busted for that. So senators are like, whoa, can we have amongst our 100 senators somebody in our Senate chambers who is guilty and convicted of a felony in Louisiana? And they had some interesting discussions. Some of them are like, that guy should be expelled. We should get rid of him. And other people are like, well, we should at least censure him and say, shame on you, that was really bad what you did. It got a little complicated, though. You ready? Sometimes it gets complicated this way. What do you suppose, Megan, is going to happen if this guy got kicked out of the Senate? Are they going to just leave his Senate seat vacant? Or is somebody going to be put into it? Somebody's going to put into it. This is where it's very important that you know what the law of the state is. And there's 50 states, and their laws are all just a little bit different. Some states say, if that was a Republican senator, then you have to put another Republican in to replace him. But not all states do. Louisiana, for example, said, if you're the governor and there's a vacancy, you can put whoever you want in there. You can put a Democrat to serve out, like maybe either the remainder of the term, that could be quite a few years, or typically like until the next federal election. So it could be like a year and a half, and so forth. Put this down. In Louisiana, with David Vitter, the governor could pick whoever he wanted. It was a guy at the time. Whoever he wanted, Democrat or Republican. Well, guess who he probably would have picked? Well, no. At that time, the governor of Louisiana was a Democrat. Do you think he would have picked a Democrat? He probably would have picked a Democrat. Those are in the Senate, you can see right now, between the Republicans and the Democrats, 50-50, one Senate seat makes a big difference. So, if you're a Republican senator and you're like, man, David Vitter, whoa, dude, that was not okay. Are you going to kick him out? Are you going to vote to kick him out? You're a Republican? You're going to kick another Republican out? So what is that going to mean? That's going to be one more Democrat. So most of the Republicans at that time are like, man, Vitter, you're embarrassing us and so forth, and you're putting us in a difficult spot. We really might want to get rid of you, but we're afraid you're going to get replaced by a Democrat. So what did they do? Censure. Yeah, they censured him. I mean, that was the extent of it. So now they've already established a pattern. Censure for felony prostitution. I'm not going to get into all the details here because it's sort of like, oh my God, la 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 la. Not too long after the Vitter thing, something came up associated with one of Idaho's two senators. Okay, this was Senator Craig, Larry Craig. This is before, I think Crapo was in the Senate at the time, but Risch was not. Okay, so this is a while back, actually. Senator Craig pled guilty to a misdemeanor charge, not felony, a misdemeanor charge, arising out of an incident in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He thought that it was going to be really quiet because he figured, I'll just go ahead and plead guilty to a misdemeanor and no one's going to find out about it. Well, guess what? People found out about it, and he tried to take his plea back. He tried to sort of say, can I undo my guilty plea? And the judge was like, no, you can't do that. Well, what were the facts? Because it was really embarrassing. In Minneapolis at the airport, there was a problem of people engaging in intimate behavior in a public restroom. And one of the men's restrooms had a reputation of being a gathering point for men for intimate behavior that they didn't necessarily maybe know each other, but they were doing that in the restroom. You're like, ah, la, 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 la. So, I mean, if you're a mom and you got a little boy that you're traveling with, are you going to send him alone into the men's room? Or are you going to take him in? All right, guys, you ready? What was this is really embarrassing, you don't have to answer, but what was the oldest age that you were taken into a women's room because your mom didn't want to let you go by yourself? You're like 15, just kidding, no. I mean, it's like there's a point in time where you're like, so the people at Minneapolis airport were hearing about stuff that was going on in the restroom. And they're like, man, we got to put a stop to this. How many of you guys are interested in going to law enforcement? Okay, there you go. So maybe some junior member of the Minneapolis Airport Police was given the responsibility of staking out in the men's restroom. Okay, it's like sometimes you have to go undercover. And so literally this officer was in one of the guys' seats, and apparently there were like two indications of starting a communication whereby ultimately an intimate agreement would take place. One was to tap the toe of the person sitting next to you. You're like, what? Yes, every year when I do this, like students go into the, you can't do that now because we got like separation and so forth. The other one was like reaching your hand underneath the thing. And apparently if that takes place, those two things, then it starts onto the thing of like, then there is an agreement. And apparently those two, according to the police officer there, that happened with Craig, both of those two things. And so he was arrested and charged with soliciting intimate behavior in a public restroom. He was charged with a misdemeanor. He pled guilty, but he wanted to keep it quiet. But it's a public record. And guess what happens with public records? They become public, and people find out about it. So he tried to take it back. The Republicans in the Senate are like, oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. Why don't you quit? He wouldn't quit. So can they get rid of him? Can they vote him out? Can they expel him? Because there was a Republican governor, and they would have appointed another Republican. But did they do that? No, because his misdemeanor was not as serious as a felony that they let the other guy off the hook. So he served out the remainder of his term. Did he ever run for public office in Idaho again? No, because in Idaho, they don't think too fondly of politicians who are, at least initially, pled guilty to soliciting intimate behavior in a restroom. So make sure you wipe down your desks. Head to the restroom. Don't violate any laws while you're there. And we will continue with our notes.